Hello and welcome to a new chapter of Azure Support Academy. In this new chapter number 26, we are going to talk about what that means in connection pooling. My name is Jose Manuel Jurado. I am an escalation engineer working at Microsoft. This video is part of a series of short videos about coding best practice based on customer support case experience. So let's get started. What is the agenda for today? Today we are going to talk about three basic things when you're using connection pooling. First of all is the impact. Using the different drivers that we have, for example, SQL native client, ODBC, etc. Other thing is about error and the possible solutions that we have for this. For example, we have one that's very common issue is when you reach the maximum number of you pool, it's time expired. Other things, it's about how we are going to measure the connection. What is the option that we have or the metrics that we have in order to review when we are using connection pooling.
Okay, so before starting this session, I would like to emphasize in 3 or 4 points that we need to know when you're using connection pooling. These are the parameters of the connection pooling, okay? So if you want to use the connection pooling, you have this parameter in your connection pooling, you can specify yes or not. By default, in many drivers, it's enabled by default. Other things about the number of pool size, okay? The max pool size mean what is the number of number of connections that you are going to establish at the same time, okay? Also, the mean pool size. The mean pool size means the following. Every time that you establish a connection, SQL will try to open to use a new item. During this process, SQL needs, for example, to open the driver needs to open a new port, will take some time, etc. Okay, but if you specify mean pool size, at the end you are going to improve this type of connections. And also, I think that also is the most important thing here. It's about to use application name parameter. My recommendation is always to try to specify the name of the application name. So if you don't specify this, you are going to, the driver will use, for example, the name of the driver. In this case, .NET SQL Client, Microsoft ODBC, GDBC, etc. So my suggestion is try to specify it by name of your application. Not just only about to know how many connections that we have. It's also, suppose that your application is failing for any specific reason, you are going to see, okay, this application is my application that is based on this. If you have multiple applications, at the end, you are going to identify what is coming from the connection. Okay, so you know this application. Right now, I'm going to establish around 2,000 connections. I'm going to use the pooling. I'm going to close the connection after I open the connection. So my application will try to open the connection, do something, and close the connection. Okay, and I'm going to use the maximum pool size for me will be 50. So let's get started and see what is the impact, for example, using connection pooling. Okay, I'm going to run this process. As you can see, the connection pooling takes not few milliseconds, nothing in this point. Remember that I'm working from home during this COVID-19. So right now the connection is very, very good. So let me show you what happened if I remove the connection pooling. So I'm going to specify it right now. Please don't use the connection pooling. As you can see right now, you could see how much time it's taking my application in order to connect to the server. Okay, so right now it's 21 milliseconds, 22 milliseconds, 23 milliseconds. Okay, this is the most important thing. Okay, in order to, what is the reason that we need to use the connection pooling or not, okay? So other thing that is very important is to close your connection. For me, the most important thing is how you manage the errors, okay? Suppose that my code have an error. I don't know what happened, but I'm not closing correctly the connection. So right now I'm going to establish again 200 connections. I'm going to enable pooling again, okay, and I'm going to run this application. So what that means? That means that I'm going to establish the connection without closing them. I'm going to run again. As you could see here, right now, it's something that's stopped. I don't know what is the reason, but it's in my application is not able. As you can see, I'm reaching the maximum number of connections. Right now, I'm trying to connect for 51 times to my database, but as I didn't close my connection, SQL or the driver needs to is trying to find what is the available connection that they have. If the client don't have any new connections, in order to obtain a new connection from the pool, you are going to receive this type of message. Okay, so I close my application. For example, one of the best practice that I use when I have this type of problems, for example, I'm going to show you right now what is the main goal. Okay, but right now, as you can see here, I having this this error. I'm going to establish for this point. 1 second, it's here. Okay, so this is the error that you are going to have. So it's not the connection is running well. Sorry, the connection is running well. The database is running well. The problem is I'm not closing the connection. Why? Because I not manage correctly the errors that I have in my application, or I have a lot of connection. For example, I reach one limit about it. Okay, so it's very important to know this limit. Okay, so for the reason, for example, if I establish my max pool to 400, again, I'm going to have the same connections. And when I reach, for example, 401 or something like this, I'm going to have this type of problems, okay? It's not able to obtain. So what is the lesson learned here? It's the most important thing is remember that it's very important to manage correctly the errors, close your connection when you have any problem, okay? And also try to escalate your application depending on the number of connections. Okay, it's very important, for example, that if all the for example, if you have a load balancer for your application, you have 4 or 3 or 4 nodes, and then remember that the connection pooling will be per application, per connection string, per application. So that means that every node we have 400 connection in this case, for example, okay, and also about the connection string. So you have different connections, you are going to have a new ones, okay. So as you can see, we are reaching then right now the limit. The main idea is when we reach the limit, one suggestion that I would like to suggest when you reach this point, beside all the errors, it's, for example, is try to clean, for example, here. 1 second is here. Yeah, 1 second. The connection is established. When I reach this point, normally I used to run these clear all pools or clear pools. What is the idea? The idea is something happened, I don't know, but my main idea is to reset the connection. Okay, I'm going to have an impact when we have another connection, but in this case, at the end, as you could see here, after the error that I'm facing, I'm going to at least the way to establish a new connections. Okay, so as you can see here, after run the clear all pools, I'm going to have a new pool. Okay, so again, but the most important thing in this case is try to manage correctly the errors, okay, or the problems, etc. If you're using, for example, other driver, for example, ODBC, remember that, for example, in Windows, remember that you could specify the connection pool in here. When you're using ODBC data source administration, 32 or 64 bits, so you could specify how many connections you are going to have in the pool, okay? How many pool timeouts you are going to have, okay? So you are going to specify how many will be remaining without using in the by seconds, okay? So it's very important to mention this one. So in this point we reach about what is the problem, and also we reach a command expire. So what is other information, for example, that we have in, for example, in SQL native client in order to obtain all this data? So in order to know how many connections, how many active connections that you have, okay, you could do two things. One is to use performance counter, okay, running in your Windows environment, or also you could add in your code. In this case, I add this functionality in my code, okay. I'm going to establish true here. As you can see, you are going to see a new information that I have in my code. Okay, for example, right now my application is running in the speed number 22180, and as you can see here, you know the performance counter, you could see the performance counter about, okay, right now I have an active connection pool, so it's my application. I have how many connections that we have right now, it's 5. Okay, how many connections per second I have, it's 5. So with this information, you could see, or you could know how many connections that you have, what happening when you code, etc. So it's very simple. Basically, we have an example in our Microsoft web page, but basically the option that you need to establish is to find this word in internet, for example, other than that performance counters, okay, and you are going to see all this information, okay. So I establish every time that I have a problem, I use to enable this option in order to know, okay, what happened, how many connections that I have before reaching an error, okay.
Okay, so what is the takeaways? For me, it's basically three things. Avoid leaving connection open, okay? Use tools to identify the problems, like say performance counter, using performance counter in Windows, or adding your code the performance counters. Okay, and three, the last one is to prevent, okay? It's very important. Error handle, and also try to use the stopwatch and other things in order to know what is the time spent in different executions. So if you have any questions, please send me an email to jmjurado@microsoft.com. Thank you so much for attending this session, and see you in the next chapter.